Welcome to the Ultrahuman experience. This session is free for you for the complete experience. Please download the Ultrahuman app.
Hello, my name is Trisha Brio. Tonight, we're going to meet a famous little girl called Alice. And with her, we will explore that curious, magical, fantastical place, Wonderland. A place where rabbits can talk, cakes can make you grow tall, and tea parties go on for eternity. Before we start our journey, take a few moments to make sure you're comfortable. You may want to dim or turn off the lights. Make sure your pillow is just in the right position and snuggle into your cozy blanket. Close your eyes. It's time for you to turn on your imagination. Let's do this together. It is springtime. Birds twitter and all kinds of flowers are in bloom. The sun is warm, just the right temperature, and it feels wonderful to be outdoors. You see two girls heading towards the entrance of a park, an arched gate painted white. Through the gate, you see lush green trees spotted with blooming flowers. You too walk towards the gate, and as you come closer, you realize the girls ahead of you are sisters. The elder girl, who walks just a little bit ahead of her little sister, carries a book in her arm. She walks carefully, properly, just like an older sister would. The younger girl lingers, pulling back, curious about the world, her attention darting here and there, lingering behind, and then racing forward to catch up with her sister. There's something a little bit mischievous about her, and you find yourself liking her. This is Alice. The girls reach the entrance of the park, and Alice pauses to look behind. You don't want to be left behind, so you too run to catch up with them just as they enter the park. As you go through the gate to the park, you feel a pull of energy, like you've crossed a special portal, and you feel the air around you vibrate with magic. It feels like electricity. You cross over, and the park looks slightly different than it did from outside. The leaves are more green, and the colors brighter. You have entered Alice's world. It was a fine spring afternoon. Little Alice and her elder sister decided to go for a stroll to a park nearby. As they entered the park, they were welcomed by a bouquet of fragrances. There was soothing lavender, sweet hyacinth, pleasing rose, and many others that Alice couldn't identify. It was like walking into a perfumery. Inhaling appreciatively, the two sisters walked further. The garden had quaint cobblestone pathways that wound gracefully through the shrubbery and hedges that had been trimmed into near-perfect globes. There were yellow and orange butterflies, the edges of their wings dusted with tan and green. And if you listened, you could hear the melodious song of the greenfinch, answered by the staccato chirp of the great spotted woodpecker and the long tweet of a sparrowhawk. It sounded like many birds were out and about, enjoying the garden while doing their daily chores. The girls walked and skipped along the pathways for a while, pausing on a small bridge to look at the goldfishes swimming below. To marvel at the velvety petals of a rambling pink rose and a line of determined ants marching up the trunk of an old oak. Then Alice's sister spotted a rather comfortable spot under a silver birch tree and decided to settle there and read the book she had brought with her. In a few minutes, she was engrossed in the story. Alice walked around for a while, but soon got bored. She sighed, looked at her sister lost in her book, and wished that she had also thought of getting a book, or her dolls, or even her diary to write or draw in. And so there she was, twirling a blade of grass around her finger, wondering how to occupy herself, when she saw a white rabbit hurry past her. He was looking quite dapper in a white and black striped waistcoat. Pausing a few feet ahead of her, he pulled out a pocket watch and exclaimed, "I'm so late," and hurried off again. Alice was fascinated. She'd never seen a well-dressed, talking rabbit before. She got up and followed him. The rabbit ran to a large hole at the bottom of a tree, slid in, and disappeared from sight. Without blinking an eye, Alice did the same. Down, down, down the rabbit hole she went for a long, long time. Then, quite suddenly, her descent slowed, and she felt she was falling in slow motion. It was such a wonderful feeling. She seemed to be floating in the air and gently drifting down like a leaf being carried by a soft breeze. She felt herself becoming calm and peaceful. She took a moment to look around and saw that the sides of the tunnel were lined with bookshelves and cupboards. How fascinating, she thought, as she floated down further and then landed on a soft pile of leaves and straw. She sat up and looked around. She was in a circular room with a long passage leading away from it. The white rabbit was walking briskly down the passage. Rising to her feet, she brushed off the leaves and bits of straw clinging to her clothes and walked after the rabbit. After she had taken a couple of dozen steps, she saw the rabbit turn right and disappear. Moving a little faster, she also turned right and entered into a long, low hall that was lit up by a row of lamps hanging from the roof. Alice looked around. It was a beautiful room, painted in soft pastel shades. The lampshades were crystal, and they glowed with a soft, muted light. Standing in the room, Alice felt relaxed and comfortable. The most unique part of the room was its doors. Usually rooms have 1 or 2 doors, but this one had more than 10. Alice walked up and down the room. Curious, she also jiggled the handles of some of the doors. They were all locked. Wondering how she could get out of the place, or if there was any way to open the doors, she looked around. Her eyes fell on a 3-legged glass table that had definitely not been there before. On this table, there lay a little golden key. Is this the key to one of the doors? Alice wondered. Let me try it. She picked up the key, got down on her hands and knees, and tried the key in several doors. It wasn't this door. Nor was it the second door, nor the third either. Finally, hidden behind a curtain, she found a door about 15 inches high. She inserted the key and turned it. Click, the door swung open. Curious to know what lay on the other side, Alice lay on the floor and looked out. What she saw on the other side took her breath away. She was looking at the most heavenly garden she had ever seen. The sun was shining, and its warmth reached out and kissed Alice's face. The grass was a soothing green and so inviting. She could imagine herself walking on it, feeling its softness and warmth on the soles of her feet. And the flowers, there were daffodils, tulips, sunflowers, roses, marigolds, pansies, periwinkles. They all looked fuller than usual, and their fragrance headier as it wafted through the garden. Squirrels darted about picking up nuts and berries. Bees flew from one flower to another in search of nectar. And the butterflies spread their bright wings and flew up and down in an ecstatic dance that left Alice mesmerized. Then there were fountains that swayed from side to side, sending a fine spray of water sprinkling on the plants and the grass around. And above all this, the vast sky stretched like an azure canopy, with tufts of cottony clouds adding a gentle touch of white. Oh, I wish I could go into that garden, but I'm too big. I wish I could become smaller, thought Alice. She got up and went back to the glass table. There she found a glass bottle with a pretty label around its neck that had "Drink Me" printed on it in beautiful lettering. Alice picked up the bottle, looked at it, shook it, and then, making up her mind, opened it and took a sip. This is delicious, she said. It tastes like a mix of cherry tart, custard, pineapple, toffee, and hot buttered toast. She took another sip, and another, and soon finished it all. In a few moments, she started feeling smaller and smaller and smaller. She looked at the glass table. It was looming above her now. I can go through the door now, said Alice delightedly. She ran towards the door, eager to push it open and enter the garden. But alas, as she reached the door, she realized her mistake. She had left the little golden key on the glass table, and now she was too small to get it. But Alice was determined to find a way to open the door. She walked back to the glass table and tried climbing one of its legs. She slipped down. Unwilling to give up, she started pondering what she could do next. And then her eyes fell upon a small glass box lying under the table. On the box, in an elegant hand, was printed, "Eat me." Intrigued, Alice opened the box and found some cake in it. Maybe this will help me grow bigger, she thought, and took a cautious nibble. And nothing happened. She took another bite, this one slightly bigger. Whoosh! She felt the top of her head rise upwards. Hopeful now, she took a few more bites and soon finished the cake. Whoosh! She found her eyes level with the top of the glass table. Quickly, she picked up the golden key and put it in her pocket. However, she noticed that she was still growing. She sat down on the floor, but kept getting bigger and bigger, till her head touched the roof. "Oh dear," she said, "I'm in quite a pickle. How do I become small again?" As she sat, trying to figure a way out of her dilemma, she heard the pattering of feet in the distance. Alice looked hopefully in the direction of the sound. Maybe whoever was coming could help her. A few minutes later, the White Rabbit hurried into the room. He was all dressed up, as if going for a royal ceremony, carrying a pair of white kid gloves in one hand and an ornate fan in the other. As he passed her, Alice spoke in a low voice. "If you please, sir." The rabbit looked at her and jumped. Alarmed, he dropped his fan and gloves and ran away as fast as he could. Alice picked up the fan and gloves. Since it was hot in the room, she started fanning herself, still wondering how she could find a way out of her situation. It had been such an unusual day, with a surprise at every turn. A few minutes later, she noticed that she had put on the rabbit's gloves. "How can I have done that?" she thought. "Am I growing small again?" She looked at the glass table and found that, indeed, it had become taller than her. Puzzled, she stopped fanning herself and noticed that she stopped growing smaller too. She dropped the fan and walked toward the little door. Taking the key out of her pocket, she opened the door and walked out into the captivating garden. Breathing in deeply, she stretched her arms out and threw her head back, enjoying being out in the open, enjoying the gentle sunshine. She let her eyes close and stood this way for quite some time. Then, opening her eyes, she decided to explore the garden and the dense wood beyond it. Alice wandered around in the garden for a long time, offering nuts to squirrels, helping some sunflowers shake off the large leaves that had fallen on them from the taller plants nearby. She moved her hands playfully through the fine spray of water created by the fountains. She also lay down on the soft grass and watched the clouds drift by, trying to find interesting images in them. At one point, her gaze shifted from the sky to the plants and below. There, growing just above the ground, were mushrooms. Some of these mushrooms were growing in clusters, like a happy family. Others were growing singly. You could see almost all colors there. And the interesting thing was that they were all in the most soothing shades. Pale pink with delicate yellow dots. Stripes of soft aqua and muted green. Misty lavender with tiny tan flowers. A hushed marbling of peach and turquoise. and many more. Enthralled, Alice moved closer to get a better look. There, sitting on top of a particularly large sea green-colored mushroom, was a caterpillar. While there was nothing startling about a caterpillar on a mushroom, what made this one unique was the fact that this caterpillar was smoking a long hookah and enjoying every puff with his eyes closed. Not wishing to disturb him, Alice spoke softly. "Hello, sir. Could you please tell me how I could become a little taller, please?" Drawing deeply on his hookah, the caterpillar opened his eyes and looked questioningly at Alice. "What size do you want to be?" he asked. Alice replied, "Taller than what I am now. You see, I will need to go home soon, and I need to be a bit taller than 3 inches. The caterpillar took the hookah out of its mouth, yawned, and then started packing it up. Once it was emptied, folded, and rolled properly, he put it into his backpack. As Alice watched, amused, Caterpillar walked over to the edge and slid off the mushroom in one smooth move. He landed effortlessly on all his 16 legs, bounced up, and started walking away. Just as Alice opened her mouth to call out to him, he paused, turned around, looked at her, and said, "Eat a piece of that mushroom. One side will make you grow shorter, and the other side taller." Turning his back on Alice, he walked away, his backpack bouncing up and down on his back. Excited, Alice reached out and broke off a piece of the mushroom from the side closest to her. Holding that in her left hand, she walked around to the other side of the mushroom and got a piece from there as well. This she held in her right hand. "Let's find out which piece will make me grow taller and which one shorter," she said, and nibbled on the piece of mushroom in her left hand. Immediately, she started to become smaller. Quickly, she took a bit from the piece in her right hand, and she started growing taller. She did this for some time, nibbling from her right hand, then from her left hand, till she had reached her normal height. This felt strange, because she had become so used to being either huge or tiny. She turned around and looked at the garden around her, expecting the plants, the fountains, and butterflies to be quite small. They had been of normal height when she was 3 inches high, and now that she was much taller, they would naturally be smaller. She would probably tower over them all. Maybe she would be able to look over the tops of the trees. However, to her surprise, the garden, its trees, plants, butterflies, squirrels, and fountains had also grown. They felt normal at her current height as well. "This truly is Wonderland," thought Alice to herself. "A garden that grows and shrinks according to a person's height. How magical." She looked around to see in which direction the wood she had spotted earlier lay. Seeing it towards her right, she started walking that way. Along the way, she saw a cat, or rather, she saw the face of a cat, with its eyes, ears, twitching nose, whiskers, and something she had never seen on a cat's face earlier: a grin. Yes, This cat was grinning from ear to ear. And what's more, you could only see the cat's face suspended in midair. The rest of its body was invisible. "Where's the rest of the cat?" thought Alice, and moved closer to this most unusual phenomenon. Though by now, she was quite used to seeing and doing things she had never seen or done before in her life, before sliding into the rabbit hole. So she wasn't too surprised. "Hello, cat," said Alice. "Hello," said the cat, still grinning from ear to ear. "I'm Alice. What's your name?" "You just said it," said Cat. "Oh, you're Cat. Nice to meet you," said Alice, and noticed that slowly the rest of the cat's body was becoming visible. "Why are you grinning?" asked Alice. "Because I'm a Cheshire cat," said Cat. "I didn't know that Cheshire cats grinned. In fact, I didn't know that cats could grin," said Alice. "Sure they can. Actually, they all can," said Cat. "I don't know of any cats that do," Alice said, very politely. "You don't seem to know many cats then," said Cat. "Anyway," he continued, "what are you doing here?" "I've explored this beautiful garden, and next I thought I would explore the wood, and then I would very much like to go somewhere from here. Could you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from there?" "That would depend completely on where you want to get to," said the cat. "I don't much care where," Alice started to say, when the cat interrupted her. "Then it doesn't matter which way you go," said the cat. "As long as I get somewhere," Alice added as an explanation. "Oh, you will surely reach somewhere or the other," said the cat, "if you only walk long enough." "That's quite true," thought Alice. So she tried another question. "What sort of people live about here?" "In that direction," the cat said, waving its right paw towards one part of the wood, "lives a hatter. And in that direction, waving the other paw, lives a March hare. You can visit either one. They're both mad. In fact, the hatter is called the Mad Hatter." Thinking deeply about this piece of information, Alice remarked, "I'm not sure if I would like to meet mad people." "Oh, you can't help that," said the cat. "We're all mad here. I'm mad. You're mad. How would you know if I'm mad or not?" said Alice. "You must be," said the cat, "or you wouldn't have come here." Not sure if that proved it at all, Alice went on. "And what makes you think that you're mad?" "To begin with," said the cat, "a dog's not mad. Do you agree with that?" Not sure where this was leading, Alice said, "I suppose so." "Well then," the cat went on, "you see, when a dog is angry, it growls, and when it's pleased, it wags its tail. Consider me now. What do? I growl when I'm pleased, and wag my tail when I'm angry. And that, my friend, proves that I'm mad. I think I would call it purring, not growling," said Alice. "Call it what you like," said the cat. "Now, I'll be off. If you happen to play croquet with the Queen today, you'll see me there." Saying this, the cat vanished. Alice was not very surprised at this. She was getting so used to queer things happening. While she was looking at the place where the cat had been, it suddenly appeared again. "Remember," he said, still grinning, "Mad Hatter lives that way," pointing to the wood, "and the March Hare over there," waving his paw at another section of the wood. "Go on, visit them," he said, his grin wider than ever. "You may have a good time." This time, he vanished slowly, beginning with the end of his tail and ending with the grin, which remained for quite some time, even after the rest of it had gone. "Well, I've often seen a cat without a grin," thought Alice, "but a grin without a cat. It's the most curious thing I ever saw in my life." Alice stood there puzzling over where she should go next. After a few minutes, she decided the wood looked very inviting, and she would like to explore it. And if she happened to meet the March Hare or the Mad Hatter, well, she could just wish them a good day and carry on. Having made her decision, Alice started towards the wood, eager to see the treasures that it held within itself. As she entered it, she saw some charming trees that looked like they had been standing there since the earth was born. They looked like a group of old wise men who, if only they could talk, would have so many stories to tell. Smiling, Alice passed them and moved deeper into the forest. The sounds of the forest were so different from the garden. Here, the wind whispered through the trees, swaying the branches and rustling the leaves. As Alice continued, the breeze picked up, and soon she was walking through a shower of small leaves drifting down from the trees. Even the light was different here. Rays of sunlight gently filtered through the thick canopy of trees, creating pools of light on the ground. Many small forest animals darted in and out of the light, enjoying its warmth. She stopped and stretched her arms out to experience this enthralling moment fully. A few minutes later, she continued her exploration. Soon, she approached a copse of trees. To her surprise, she heard some voices. As she focused in the direction of the voices, she could make out the chimney of a little house tucked into the forest. Wondering who lived in the house, she started towards it, her feet barely making a sound on the thick carpet of moss that lined the forest floor. As she approached, the voices got louder. She could make out words like tea, biscuits, thyme, butter, and scones. She peered around a tree trunk and saw that a long table had been set up for tea. Though there were 8 places set with cups and saucers, a hare and a hatter were crowded together around one corner. A dormouse lay asleep on the table between them. Alice stepped out from behind the tree and called out a cheery hello. The hare and the hatter turned to look at her and cried out, "No room, no room." Puzzled, Alice said, "But there is plenty of room." She sat at one end of the table and looked around. I'm Alice, and you are? I'm March Hare, and pointing with his teacup, said, He's the Mad Hatter, and this sleeping beauty here is the Dormouse. Pleased to meet you, said Alice, pointing to the other places that had been set at the table. She asked, Who are these places for? For us, replied the Mad Hatter. You see, some time back, I had a tiff with time, and ever since that, the Hatter went on, he won't do a thing I ask. It's always 6 o'clock now. It's always tea time, and we have to have tea over and over again. We've no time to wash the things in between. So, we set up all 8 places. Then you keep moving around, I suppose, said Alice. Exactly so, said the Hatter, as the teacups and food plates get used up. What a peculiar yet delightful place this is, thought Alice. The animals talk and dress in our kind of clothes. There are drinks that shrink you and cakes that make you big. Gardens that grow and shrink according to your height. Cats that can appear or disappear at will, where time can literally be looped. It's so full of wonder. What other adventures lie in store for me? She bid adieu to the March Hare, the Mad Hatter, and the Dormouse, who woke up long enough to wave his paw sleepily at Alice. As she moved around this wonderland, Alice met many intriguing folks, like the Duchess, who was trying so hard to keep her baby quiet. And the baby, as it turned out, wasn't really a baby. It was a pig. She met soldiers and gardeners who were actually playing cards, with names like 7, Ace, and 3. She met a mock turtle and a griffin, as well as the Queen of Hearts, whose favorite sentence was, "Off with his head." Why, Alice even played croquet using flamingos as mallets, and gave evidence at a trial presided over by the King and Queen of Hearts. At one point during the trial, a whole pack of cards rose up into the air and came flying down upon her. Startled, she jumped, and as she tried to shield her face from the cards, she woke up and found herself in the park with her head in her sister's lap, who was gently brushing away some leaves that had fluttered down from the trees upon her face. "Wake up, Alice dear," said her sister. "Why, what a long sleep you've had." "Sleep," said Alice. "I was asleep? That means, oh, I've had such a curious dream." She told her sister about all the adventures she had in her dream. When she had finished, her sister gave her an affectionate kiss on her forehead and said, "That was a curious dream, but now that you're awake, run in for your tea. It's getting late." So Alice got up and ran home, thinking all the while, what a wonderful dream it had been. But her sister sat still, watching the glorious sunset and thinking of little Alice and all her wonderful adventures. After a while, she too began dreaming. And this was her dream. First, she dreamed of little Alice, of her small hands clasping her knees, her bright, eager eyes looking up into hers. She could hear the very tones of her voice and see that little toss of her head to keep back the wandering hair that would always get into her eyes. As she listened, The whole place around her became alive with the enchanting creatures of her little sister's dream. She heard the long grass rustling at her feet as the white rabbit hurried by. She felt herself fall slowly down the rabbit hole and reach the same low room with its many, many doors. She became small, then big. She felt the fine spray from the fountains on her face, smelled the smoke from the caterpillar's hookah, saw the cat's grin as his body appeared and vanished, again and again, heard the rattle of teacups as the March Hare, the Mad Hatter, and the Dormouse shared their never-ending meal, and heard the voice of the Queen commanding, "Off with his head." Once again, the baby, who was actually a pig, was sneezing on the Duchess's knee. And at the trial this time, it was she who gave evidence. Lastly, she imagined how this same little sister of hers would, as she grew into a young woman, cherish this delightful dream of hers. How she would gather little children around her and make their eyes brighter and eager with stories of her time in Wonderland. By doing this, she would relive the simple joys of her childhood and those happy, carefree summer days.